Today, I am joined by artist Regina Herod. She is interested in using material as surrealistic metaphors to reimagine the relevance between current and colonized histories of Black and Brown people and the emotional terrains and cyclical circumstances that remain in place through time. In conceptualizing her sculptures, she believes that a kind of storytelling and time travel come into the work. The origins of Regina's work stems from her nomadic existence as a child and her recollections of unclear ruminations surrounding racial divides and marginalization. Examining the connections between our original heritage, resilience, and migrations is the overarching investigation in her trajectory as a sculptor, and she uses the materials of wood, organic materials, paper, plaster, glass, pigmented waxes, and metals as ironic components that coincide with our historical experiences. Regina's process involves twisting, charring, breakage, reassemblage, and layering, and she aligns the unnatural colors within her sculptures as a reflection on the levels of phenomena and beauty within the world. Regina Herod is a Los Angeles-based artist and arts educator. Her works have been exhibited in California, New York, and Oregon galleries, and she has collaborated in performances at the Broad Museum and the Wende Museum. Welcome, Regina. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dimitri.
Yeah, we met at an opening at Patricia Sweeto Gallery quite some time ago, and though we didn't have a lot of time to engage in conversation, I was immediately intrigued by not only you, but the moment that I saw your work. And so I'm really happy that this is, I don't know, 6 or 7 months later, that we finally get a chance to sit down.
Well, it's just great to be here. And I am very excited for our dialogue.
Me as well, me as well. So where are you right now and how are you doing?
Well, I'm actually in my office right now, and I am doing pretty good, just sort of vacillating between teaching and being in the studio as much as I can get there, and life, like all of us, life is good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Life is good. Can't expect anything better than that. I'm really interested in your role as a teacher, and how that interacts with your other role as an artist. Do the two inform each other, or how does impact your work?
I believe, like, I've been an educator for almost 28 years, and I currently teach mostly freshmen and sophomores in the community college sector. And in the past, I've taught a lot of high school students as well. And I believe there is an intersection, especially when it comes to design courses, whether that be two-dimensional design or 3D design and construction. Most of my practice is and involves constructive investigative methods. And I feel like in a three-dimensional design course, it's all about that. Not only are you teaching students about how to take a two-dimensional drawing to a three-dimensional form, there is a method of trying to get them to really explore material. And that's what I like to see unfold as an educator, because it's directly tied to what I do in the studio. And I'm not only interested in the process of building, but I'm interested in what happens when sometimes that constructive method fails and how that can reveal itself in a work of art, a lot of that. And I would say that happens in the classroom as well. It teaches, I believe that my students teach me a lot, actually, especially younger students. I've also had the great pleasure over the years of working with secondary students. And they teach me a lot, you wouldn't think, but younger artists are very, very much about spontaneity and discovery, and that moment of like, oh my God, I didn't know this could happen in a print, or, whatever it is. And I like to see that unfold. I think that's one of the reasons why I really like teaching a lot. It's not necessarily passing on specific elements of how I make things, but I'm passing on what I know, and I'm witnessing their own relationship to language and art.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love that. I love that. I would love to go back into your own history and, what got you into being an artist, and, do you remember, can you think back to that moment where you knew that this path of being an artist was the one for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually started off my first venture into college was not as an art major. It was as a theater major. I went to a pretty prestigious school in New York in the early 80s. And it was not only just the allure of being in New York at that time was just so striking to me, but the experience of being in this elite school that expected so much, but unfortunately was not, um, how can I say, it was not very welcoming at the time of students of color. So I found myself in an ocean of one or two. And, I'm trying to pursue, at the time, classical theater, hoping that there would be a bridge between classical theater and more of the theater endeavors that I was hoping to find in that world. But since I did that at a very young age, I was pretty young, I didn't know the reality of it.
Mm.
And I became, over time, a little disenchanted with the idea of performative moments in front of an audience when I didn't feel that that world really accepted me and my capacity to do it. So I don't know, I made a switch. I left that school and kind of floundered around for a while, and then eventually remembered that I also loved, in high school and middle school, I loved visual art, and that I'd been a maker from a very young age. I can recall being maybe 5, 6, or 7, and not coming from an environment of support with my parents. They didn't like throw art supplies my way or anything like that. They didn't even say, hey, do you want to take a class? It was all generated from me and my inquisitiveness about wanting to turn something into something else. So when I was really young, I found things that I could sort of cobble together into something. And I believe that that was the beginning of my, I'd say, my fascination with organic material, in a way, when I really look at it. And then if I kind of leap back to that time in New York, I wound up at City University of New York, taking printmaking classes, taking painting courses. At the time, CUNY was very politicized, especially in the printmaking arena, and poster creations and, all kinds of things. And I got into things that I didn't know about, lithography and unconventional methods of printing. And I believe that was a spark, but I've always had that. And one of the reasons I brought up those early years from my childhood is I believe that it was in the cards for me, even if my father wanted me to go to law school. It just was. So here I am. I did that from CUNY. I got married, had some kids, kept chipping away at my education, eventually wound up at San Diego State University and got my undergrad there, and then got my MFA at Otis. So, but it took a while.
Hey, but you made it. You made it.
I did.
Yeah, that's all that matters. And it's also really inspiring to hear that that was your journey. You spoke a little bit about your theater experience as a younger person. And on your website, it also says in your bio that you believe those early years contribute to constructive forms that evolve within your visual arts practice. Can you please speak a little bit more to this? I'm really curious about
Yes.
the connection between your theatrical training and performances, and how those interact with these forms that we're now seeing actually behind you.
Yes. I think, my three-dimensional work is I can't call it theatrical, but it's kind of unconventional in the way that I'm working with materials. So sometimes people are a little, mystified as to what these are doing. And I believe in some ways some of the forms are a bit performative
Mm,
through the use of the material that I use and the gestures within these forms. I would say in my painting practice, there's definitely a high level of theatricality in those works, which I didn't provide you with images for, but there's always a witness, there's always a watcher that pervades over all of the narrative content that happens. And in some ways, I believe that we live in a world that is imbued with a lot of stuff that is nonsensical, unreal, and jarring. So, and that kind of coincides with this idea of theatricality in the world, and why we look at things the way that we do, and all kinds of things. I hope I've answered your question, but I don't know. I think through form, through narrative, I definitely would also say that my own personal experience
mm,
from way back when just made me want to think of moments in history and make them into some sort of absurd theater, I think.
got it, got it.
What it's worth, I don't know.
So yeah, kind of speaking to that, would you mind just kind of going into some of these histories that you're referencing? Are these lived personal stories that spark the, I don't know, the creative juice for the pieces that you make? I know as we go through them, we'll see in some of the titles, it feels to me like you're referring to some specific African American histories or things that I know I've definitely heard growing up
Definitely.
from family
Absolutely.
members. But yeah, can you go into the
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say that my works stem specifically from family histories and narratives, but I do a lot of my preliminary work just by investigating historical events, past, present. And when I think about that, I'm specifically interested in the intersections between cyclical periods, in history. We have things that happened along the lines of people being disenfranchised, people being subjugated, enslaved, misused, exploited, all of these things. It's not all dark, but we have things that happened centuries ago that still have many forms now.
Mm,
And if I try to cast my lens out into the world, I don't think I'm speaking just about one demographic at all. I think I'm looking at power dynamics and infrastructures, particularly as it relates to this idea of who gets, who doesn't, how all of that's been weighted in history, how it's relevant now, how somehow as a society, many of us have not been willing to look at the past to learn about the present. And that's definitely where my allegiance is in my investigations.
oh
Yeah,
wow, that's awesome. I mean, I think with that, I should pull up some of your work. Uh,
sure.
I was kind of going back and forth between should we look at your website, but I did pull some. Uh,
Wonderful.
And so let me just do this. I am sometimes not so good with this part, so
No, I wouldn't even know.
bear with me for a
No,
moment.
not at all. I appreciate you
Um,
doing that.
okay. Hopefully you're seeing the correct screen.
I'm not seeing anything yet.
You're not seeing anything. Oh geez, you know
I'm
what?
seeing you, but
Because
there we go. Okay.
hopefully now you're seeing the correct screen.
I am,
Okay,
yes.
nice.
Dimitri, could you make, yeah, perfect.
Yes.
Wait, what am I doing?
No, you're good now.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happened with my sound just went down. This is okay. So Regina, hopefully you can hear me. I don't know what happened with
I
my
can. I
sound.
can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, if we can go into this piece, which feels very, I love this piece. I'm really absolutely obsessed with it. I feel like it's almost taking on this humanoid form.
Yes. Figure comes into it. Absolutely.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
should know my own titles. Can you remind me of the title?
I do have this on here. It disappeared. I don't know why it's not showing up.
Oh my God. I think it's called the Burden of Divine Revelation. I believe that's the title for this. Yeah. And so this piece, just, I think I was specifically thinking about the continued junction in history that says, when you think about the history of African Americans, I was thinking about the fact that for so many years, everything we were stomped down, but with the world and the society never really looking at the richness within our heritage, so many ways, and how our place in the world, good, bad, and everything else, has really lifted up this country. Like if I bring it to this country, and also looking at how, some of the natural resources that exist in Africa have made the way for affluence and, just everything in the world, everywhere, and our skills and everything. I was thinking about that, and I wanted to point at that. So this idea of burden came to me as a title, because I thought, well, we have always been viewed as lesser, but yet we know that there's so much richness in our heritage. So this idea of amplifying that just was in my mind. And I think that's what influenced the title, the reflective nature of the mirrors on both sides. You can't see the back, but they allow the viewer to see themselves within the mirror in a distorted way, to kind of point at this idea of ironies and contradictions that continue to remain right now. But we, I don't know. I was also thinking about commodifying our culture and cultures. It always happens. And I don't know. I do know, but I'm saying I don't know. I don't know. So material use in this piece is just referenced by everything that I'm trying to say and looking at.
And
The paper, the collapse.
Can you talk about what the material is? Like what are you using? And before we went live, you talked about encaustic, which just blows my mind.
Yeah, the encaustic is actually the outer layer of so much of this. I think I mentioned to you that I utilize a lot of roots and pods. So the area at the very top is, in fact, it's like rosebuds that have sort of dried out and been woven together with a coating of wax. There's welded steel at the top, rusted nails in the center of the glass. I cast paper a lot. So the wings that are falling, in a metaphoric gesture, is plaster cast and paper, but all of that is coated with molten wax, generally 4 or 5 layers. And I burn different colors on top of each other. There's wire that's embedded in between. There's wax on the beads that are on the trunk, and wax at the base with more nails. And it's hard to see from this view, but I always hide things on the inside, again, as a kind of witness to these things that I'm pointing at. There's always an element of a watcher or a witness, whether it be the paintings, as I mentioned before, or even in the sculptures. And I'm sorry, I can't articulate a specific story here, but divine revelation, as I said before, when I stopped to think about the contradiction to what we are and have been and remain in history versus the narrative that many societies have put upon us, it's just mind-boggling to me.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely, most definitely. I love this idea of the mirror to where the viewer sees themselves either reflected and in some cases, perhaps implicated within.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's the point. That's the point. And the distortion aspect of it, because when they look in the mirror, it's not a pretty picture. It is conflated in such a way so that the entire figure of the viewer is seeing something they don't want to see.
Sure. That's incredible. I'm so sorry that I do not have. Oh, hold on. There was a question that came through, and I think it's because I'm sorry that I did not do a Zoom.
Oh, that's
on this,
okay.
but we have a question. Is there a figure at the top of it next to the leaf? Is there a figure up there?
No, that's just the crown. That's the crown. That's the top part of it. And actually, that part, you can't really see from this view, but it's bound at the top. Like I literally conflated all of those petrified rosebuds and bound them to the welded steel at the top. So they are bound with the crown.
Bound as the crown.
Yes,
And there's
yes.
a little poetry in here as well. And then this piece, I'm like, oh, why I'm sorry that I do not have the titles for this. Somehow did not make it through.
Yes, I'm trying to remember myself. I should know, but I can tell you it'll come to me in a moment. But this piece definitely stems from a specific investigation of mine. I use blue a lot in the majority of my three-dimensional works. And I was thinking about the middle passage and all of the narratives that happened in the middle passage. We know what we know from history books, but we don't know the people that succumbed on those journeys over here. We don't know about the people that were thrown into the ocean that didn't make it. But what I've imagined is like just amusing on how those voices, those energies, those talents fused with the world we don't know below the sea. And I don't know, I was thinking about melding and crystallization and just black bodies at the bottom of the ocean and what would have been had another reality ensued, I guess. And that definitely is influencing the form here. In the center of the purple triangular figure in the center, there's an oracle. It's a crystal, and there are more crystals at the top, kind of like a sonic at the very, very top in between that brass. It's a sonic wave a little bit. And I bring flowers into my work as well. So the two pieces kind of surrounding that metal purple part are petrified and waxed birds of paradise. And I don't know, I was thinking about all of those voices that are still there.
Mm-hmm.
We will never know. I don't know.
That's awesome. It reminds me of, all these artists that are investigating the Drexia. Right now, Ayanna V. Jackson has her exhibition.
Yes.
Of just imagining, I love that idea of, that one takes a different spin, right?
Yes.
I think your story is based in the actual lived history. And then there's these artists that are imagining, well, what if they did create a civilization under the ocean? What would that have been like? I think also pulling in the crystal, you've got this, you called it kind of a beacon, but it's also seems like it's a healing.
Absolutely. And it's also a testament to our light on the planet. You know, like this piece and several of my pieces, but I would say particularly with this one, the name of this piece, now I remember it, it's called When the Light is Blue with Echoes. So this idea of another world submerged under there. And when you get close to the piece, it's pretty large. You literally can see different cavernous areas when you look inside. It's hard to see this here. And I've always thought, well, maybe I should come up with some sort of a virtual view where you can just go inside and see the other crystals in there. But this idea of echoes and the voices that were there, amplified by thousands of people, just, it's extraordinary to me that it's something that is never talked about historically, except to say that these people perished.
Mhm.
Now, we don't think of all that was lost in addition to their lives. Like, we just don't think about that. And I think, I don't know, some of this is fantasy for me, but it is based on my musings about historical events. And this is where I'm at in this piece. So
Awesome. Awesome. We have a question from Sandra who wants to know,
yes.
what draws you to wax? I am interested also the
Yeah.
encastic.
Yeah, well, because wax is it's very malleable. It's just wonderful. You know, first of all, you have to add a varnish to it in order for it to stick. But I love the luminescence of it. You can layer different colors on top of it. You have to burn each layer to make each layer stick. But if you don't like something, it's easy to chip it off, reheat it, scrape it off, put it back in the pot and re-butter it on again. I love the texture of wax. I just love the versatility of it and the strength of it. And I think when I was younger, I think about, oh my God, I was always fascinated with looking at, you know, on the face of sarcophaguses, I guess, or maybe it's not on the face, but the way that the Egyptians would use wax. And I remember reading the little cards way back when at the Met, different places, that it just was thousands of years old. And I just couldn't get my brain around that. So I think I retained a little bit of a fascination with that. And wax, I now know, is very enduring, but it changes through time. You know, sometimes, especially with this layered color, it will take a different look through time. And I
Oh
like,
my gosh, that's amazing. I love that you think about your work in
yes,
time and how it's going to change.
yes.
That's awesome. And today put a definition in the chat. Thank you so much, Today.
Yes. And caustic, you
really-
know, this idea of literally to burn in. And also too, I will say, I'm getting back to your question a moment ago, Dimitri, because I think it's important. Wax, it can smother, you know. So when I think about the subjects that I am looking at, the buried histories, the buried narratives, I think that's also what draws me as a metaphoric element to my work, to wax, because it can encase and it can reveal too, depending on how you're seeing it, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I love that the material that you are using has its own meaning and that it's not just a tool.
No, absolutely not. It's not. I feel like all of my materials metaphorically live together. You know, the steel always represents the power dynamics, the power infrastructures. The glass is the circumstance. You know, glass can break, it can wound, it can reflect. Paper, the paper can be the tool or the subdominant element in a historical circumstance. The wood is the resilience, because there's always petrified wood in my work as well, and that gets encased in the wax. And I'd like to say too that the wood represents the worker, you know, the people that are caught up in these narratives, no matter which piece I'm talking about, you know. So when I'm thinking about material, I am thinking about how all of these materials coalesce together and what their function is within the narrative that I'm exploring. So.
Yeah, and then, you know, in addition to you speaking of the blue, I also noticed that purple
Yes.
is a recurring motif or color throughout your work. Can you talk about the significance of purple?
Yeah, well, purple and people and strength, you know, this idea of, oh, I don't want to be cheesy here, but the blues, which I love, you know, the blues have many connotations, and this idea of how it is ricocheted through history. But purple represents strength, royalty, and in my mind, a kind of resilience. I bring red into it sometimes too, which is not evident in this piece, but you know, red is never the positive, it's always the negative within. And red tends to be buried within my works a bit. So I think purple, you know, the idea of power in spite of people not acknowledging the power. So many people of color have so much power historically and presently, and quite often it's just overlooked. And all of that power has generated an ability for this world to work.
Oh, so true.
So
Yeah,
that's why
right.
it works, you know, that's why it works. Yeah.
Yeah, home to all the natural resources, pretty much all of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also just read something. I think it's not relevant to this, but it is relevant to this conversation. I was reading an article about original iron workers and how that talent and skill was commodified by colonizers, and they took it for themselves. Like they didn't talk about the fact that they went to places like Nigeria and enslaved, you know, expert craftsmen who knew how to manipulate iron, who knew how to strengthen iron in ways that are still being used right now. And then they used it to build ships and different things, but they never credited those people that were taken. They never said, these are the people that taught us how to do these things. And we already know historically that same kind of narrative extends to other artisans, woodworkers, you know, all kinds of people we know, you know. And I just was fascinated by that article because I thought, wow, an entire industry has come about from those people and no one ever talks about it. And I feel like my endeavor is to point at these things a little bit. So
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I mean that just you saying that just reminds me of how, you know, when in Charleston, you know, or in New Orleans, you see this amazing ironwork, but then you'll also, you
yes,
know, notice some of the motifs that make their way are like, those are those are very African motifs kind of
yes,
hidden.
absolutely, absolutely. And isn't it cyclical too, Dimitri? At every junction, even down to the Olmec heads in Mexico, you know, like how did they get there? Like it's just, you know, these are the things that are sort of loosely talked about, but not enough, I think. So
Yeah, exactly. Lucreza is talking about the Sankofa symbols and how, you know, we
yes,
see that everywhere. And
yes,
it, yeah, and we just take it for granted as a beautiful, you know,
a beautiful symbol
design.
with a design. That's a
Yeah,
better way to look at it, rather than having a place in so many different structures and people ignore the meanings.
yeah.
Mhm.
In this piece right here, I'm really, you know, I was just really drawn to the green strips of metal that I don't know, for some reason, I see railroad tracks moving through this piece.
Yes.
Just
Well,
really interesting.
yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. This was, oh my gosh, my mind was in industry. And the title of this, if I can actually remember it, is so key. I guess if I just start talking, it'll come to me in a moment. But I was thinking again of industry and different kinds of industries, and how laborers, often who didn't want to be laborers, made the wheels turn of all of it. And I would say that the paper waxed editions, those are the blue purple kind of compressed pods. Some of that is aluminum as well. That represents the people who were in that life, but the steel is the business, the industry that drove it. And, you know, again, as a continuance of what I've already been talking about, all of these different industries, whether it be cotton or sugar or whatever it is, all of these industries gained wealth and still remain as a result of commodified forced labors. So that is the bending of the green metal, the bending, the shifting, the mechanical nature of how all of these industries came to be. Very calculated, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
And then, you know, just this connection we're gonna get in just a little bit. I wanted to capitalize and put two images here.
Sure.
Two images that I absolutely just am amazed by. And so, yeah, I'm just really interested in this connection with painting, which I know with the encaustic, right? It's a very painterly style of working, and I don't think I've ever seen encaustic incorporated into a sculpture before. I've only seen it on, you know, thick and pastel paintings before. And so I'm just really interested in that connection between the sculptures and your painting and drawing practice. I have a few of your drawings in here as well that we'll get to in a minute.
Yes. Well, I think, you know, I love, even with, when I think about my paintings, I butter on wax, but I can carve the wax and then I can build up successive layers of it. And even with the sculptures, I kind of do some of that as well. You know, I love working the wax into the crevices and then crushing another crevice and then layering more wax on that. That's a big part of like the process investigation. It's like, oh, what will it do here? How can I collapse this part through the use of heat and this wax? And how can it keep the form, sort of, so to speak? Even though I start off with, you know, a plastered form first, I have no fear in maybe breaking off a part of it or crumbling a part of it to make it do something else. You know, I love that. And in the piece to the right, there was a lot of that. The center part is conflated pods and roots that have been soaked and twisted and wired together. They're little green, I don't know what you would call them, but they're little pods where I've inserted pieces of cut glass in between the crevices of those pods, and then I've like waxed around that. But all of the red that you see in the center of the right piece is many, many layers that have just kind of been, I don't know, where I'm pouring, I'm slathering it on with a brush, I'm heating it, I'm letting it drip, and then I'm adding more and more and more layers to it.
Wow, that's incredible.
Thank you.
And then this piece on the left this is also with the steel. I'm assuming.
Yes, the outer casing is welded steel. And then I had to treat the steel. I like to patina steel a little bit. And once again, in this piece, that metal is the encasing power infrastructure. In that, I was thinking a lot of, I don't know why I was thinking of music and industries and all kinds of things with this piece. I'm not sure where my mind was, but all three of those waxed pieces in the center are kind of fused together with wire, even though you can't see it here. And then the metal just kind of enshrines all of it.
Mm.
So yeah,
Am I seeing a figural form in there, or is that just from this angle where
no, it's just from the angle. And actually, at some point, I'm going to get around to another photo. I currently have this piece in my studio on the wall where it's facing out. And that's the view that it really should be viewed at. But I took a image of it this way too, and this is what I put on my website, but it really has a different look when you look into the interior of it, which has red stripes and almost, it just, I'm always looking at and thinking of biomorphic things in life as well, which I think plays a part into how the forms evolve eventually. So.
Lucrezia coming through. Thank you. Part of the reason why I really wanted to pick this piece also was the title. And thank you so much, Lucrezia, for finding it. Lucrezia says you entitled the piece on the left as "They Don't Feel Pain Like We Do."
That's right.
Does that refer to the medical field thinking we as
Yes.
Black folks don't feel pain?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the barbs on the outside and this idea of sound and silent sound, like the centuries of silent pain, this crazy idea that we can just go on and on and on and endure with no pain, no repercussions historically. And we know now that we have many repercussions, and nobody ever looks at the state of our people in terms of, I don't know, mental health issues and generational traumas and so forth, but they don't feel pain like we do. It is coming directly from that, but it also was a bit in creating that title. It was a bit of a desire on my part to put that in the face of the viewer, because it's still relevant now, I mean, in so many ways. We see all of these different incidents, from the criminal justice system to everything we already know, and yet very little is done to remedy any of that because of this original idea of you can do anything to them. They don't feel it.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you for whoever found the title. Thank you. Because I feel like the titles really are very connected to what we're seeing on the screen. So
yeah, and today put your website into the chat. So I definitely invite folks to go there to see Regina's work, because it's amazing. It's a beautifully curated website as well. And speaking of curation, I wanted to show the pieces in installation view, so folks could see. Is this part of a group show, or are these your paintings in the background?
No, this was a 2-person show at the Irvine Art Center last year. And I did this show with another artist, Alex Wiesenfeld. She's amazing. And I feel like in some ways my sculptures, we have similar interests, but she makes these landscapes, these unnatural landscapes. And, with her work, she's looking at the planet and ecological concerns and so forth. But sometimes I feel like my sculptures could live in those landscapes. So we got this idea to have this 2-person show, which I think was pretty well received. And this was how we installed it. You're getting one view, but then there are more paintings to the left, and I think at least one more sculpture on the left there. But we had so much fun with this show.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous show. I mean, even from the colors and some of the forms together, that's why I was like, this could be your painting.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I've known her a few years now, but when I saw her paintings, I'm like, it's not how I paint, but I totally relate to the way that she paints and the forms that she brings into them, because I am shifting materials in similar ways.
For sure. And then, I I pulled just a couple of
I am
the
so
drawings.
happy. Oh, you have no idea how much I appreciate this, because I know I didn't get any of this to you, but you're wonderful for doing that. Thank you.
These are ones that just speak to me. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I'm like, is this someone carrying a tank? Is this someone
Mhm.
combined with the tank? And then I feel like it starts to also get me into possibly some of your process, but I would definitely want to
Yes.
unpack some of that.
Yes, yes. This is, it metaphorically, it looks like one person bleeding from the weight of this tank that's conflated with a soldier's helmet, the actual tank, just the weight of all of it, war, civil wars and all of this. And I know I was thinking of people and how people are communities and people, depending on who in the world is looking at any particular war, these historical wars, they forget about the toll that it takes on people from everything. And I think at the time when I made this drawing/painting, I was thinking about civil wars that have lasted in parts of Africa for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and just how it doesn't break a people, but it definitely hardens a society. And everybody's affected. So the metaphor within this of a lone person carrying the weight of all of that historically through decades just spoke to me. And I did that. Quite often I'll just crump up different images to make one big meaning construction.
And now in terms of your process, where the drawing and the sculpture come into play, are these two separate processes or practices, or does one directly influence the other? Can you talk about that?
You mean in terms of my drawings and my sculpture, or my
Yeah,
subject?
yeah. Like is the drawing a completely separate practice, or do you see it as does one inform the other, I guess?
I think so. I think so, because I think the drawings offer me an opportunity to work out these narratives pictorially. And then I can play with the idea of how I can transfer these surrealistic images into a surrealistic sculpture that's not as representational, not as literal, in a way. And then sometimes I would say the way that I love to push around charcoal and oil bar and stuff like that in a drawing is the same way that I like to crumple a particular material that would come into my three-dimensional work. Sometimes aluminum is also a part of the process. Like I'll take aluminum and crush it up in a certain way as a kind of maquette to get ideas for things. But yeah, I think it's definitely connected. It's not, drawing is something I love to do, but it's quite often I'm just drawing out ideas. This particular series, I decided to complete them, but I'm just working ideas out so that it can lead to what I'm doing in my 3D work. So,
Okay,
yes.
okay. I love it. And then I've got another one in here that this one just.
Yes, this I was thinking about children and how they kind of get wrapped up in war as well, and servitude, like servitude that lasts a lifetime. I'm thinking about issues that I'm really interested in, and that I think a lot of people are, but I feel like we don't talk about child misuse, child labor commodification. We don't talk about these things the way we need to talk about them. So this drawing definitely, I just wanted to get a little closer to that. Hence the imagery you see here. And yeah, the chains, the lens. How does a child see that? I had to ask myself that too. How does somebody who's so young, who's had a lifetime of labor and no childhood, how do they see their reality? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think also with this drawing, it's you know, kind of the way that it's, I want to say that it's sculpted, but the way that it's drawn is definitely giving me connections to the sculpture, to where it's, I don't know. I
I'm
don't want
glad
to
you
call
can
it
see
cubist
that.
because that's,
Yeah, I'm glad you can see that, because that is the way my mind works. And I'm constantly conflating things here in this. In this drawing, I have a hand, I have part of a foot, I have part of a thigh, I have industry above that. I
Mhm.
have part of a, not a telescope, but like just a little, I think, you know, in my mind, I thought too, telescope part, kaleidoscope, for a nod to the play that this person might have had they actually been allowed to be a child, you know,
Mhm.
and a big fat hand that shouldn't be, you know,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
so.
Yeah, I love that aspect of the work. It just, it makes it really exciting. Someone says it looks like a cannon, and yeah,
Yes. Mhm.
I
Yes.
can definitely see that as well.
Yes. And I'm always bringing cyclical line making into the drawings too. Like I love to draw and then overdraw, but again, in service to this idea of the repetitive reality of how all of these things just keep going on and on and on. You know, sometimes it even begins not just with a news report or something I know about history, because I do like history. It could be a novel that takes me to
Mhm.
another time or place that really makes me think about those real issues. You know, so it all sort
Awesome.
of starts in a drawing or something. So
That's incredible. I want to know a little bit more. You started to talk about your process a little bit, but I really want to know about your process, how
mhm.
you go about these forms. You know,
Sure,
you were
sure.
starting to talk about like things that you may read, but you
Yes,
know, I want to know even more. You know, particularly
absolutely.
around the sculptures. Like, are you working through a particular concept, and then the form follows, or do you have, you know,
Well,
kind
I
of
think
over?
yeah, that's a great question, Dimitri. I'm starting with an idea of something, and then the forms follow. And a lot of, in all my sculptures, they're all parts. I work from the center out. So I might start with the pods that typically interact with the glass element first, and then I'll put that aside. And then I think about the element that will encase the glass and how that form relates to the fragility of a situation, the fracture within a circumstance. And then that form, that plaster cast, aluminum form, or whatever it is, will relate to what came before, the glass with the pods and so forth. And then the outer layer, if I do bring in a welded metal element, encases all of it.
Mhm.
So once I make the paper or the aluminum casted forms, I sort of spray paint them to protect the plaster. And then I start to build up wax. I'll do 3 initial layers of molten wax. After melting my varnish in my wax, I'll burn that successively. Then I'll think about ways I can brighten that wax, and I'll butter on 2 or 3 more layers, and I'll burn that, scrape off parts that I don't want, wire things together if I need to. If I needed holes in it, I would have already created those holes where the wire would go ahead of time. I find a way to wire it around that glass pod element. And then I began my welding process or my twisted metal process, encasing the entire thing. And more frequently of late, I have been conflating those traditional materials or unconventional materials that I use, that I'm calling traditional materials, on top of some sort of unconventional armature. It could be a lamp piece. It could be some kind of a strange, like I might have cut off part of a lamp or cut off part of something else that I can twist, manipulate, deform, and then integrate into that whole thing. So it's all parts. You know, my studio is like littered with like a million parts of things. And then I put it together, you know how that goes,
Oh, for sure. No one wants to see my little stash of things that continues
all
to
of it.
go on and on. But yeah, it's amazing. And I love how when folks go on your website, you've got all these detail shots where they can zoom in and actually see some of these parts of things.
Yes.
And yeah, for me, it was kind of fun going through your site and trying to figure out what these things are. Or what
Yes.
originally were.
Yeah. And I feel fortunate that a few years ago, I had a breakthrough, because when I first embraced my sculptural practice, and I say that because I've been making sculptures for over 20 years, but for a long time I was hiding them. I was like making these little things and not understanding myself. They just seemed strange and weird, and I didn't know enough about the diversity in sculptural practices to understand that it's a natural thing that we do. So I started off making some abstract sculptures, but then I also made some things that were a bit more figurative, like my woman on the wall sculpture and all this. And then I was left with a place of, this isn't translating the way that I want to. Like, I don't know that I need a representational figure to narratively point out a particular subject matter. I think that I want the viewer to come to their own conclusions, because it's not my place to do that. So that's when I started to shift and say, how can I use material metaphorically to address the same things that I want to? And, that's when I really began to look at material as, trying to align material with behaviors in humans, behaviors in society, incidents in history. How can I have these things function that way?
I
If
love
that
that.
makes any sense.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I love that. That's some of my favorite form of art, because it forces you to think
Yes.
deeper and to really actually investigate. I think if you look
Yes.
at a sculpture of a person, you can enjoy the beauty and the accuracy of what the artist is trying to capture. But when an artist is focusing on the material, and the material possesses a meaning,
Yes.
metaphor, I feel, for at least for me, it makes me think and sit with the work deeper to really try to get behind the meaning. So it's the kind of
Oh, yeah.
work I enjoy the most, and I completely get what you're saying. What's next for you? Any art fairs, shows, residencies, anything?
Oh my goodness. Well, I have a little show. I did a show at and I'm going to put some work in another show he has coming up. I did a show at Elliot Hundley's project space, and that was great. I had 5 or 6 works in that show, and I'm going to put a few more in another upcoming show in November. I just, even though I don't think it's announced yet, I was informed that I got the Department of Cultural Affairs Trailblazers accommodation or whatever. That just happened. I might have another show next year, but it's not confirmed yet, so I'm not looking at that. And I'm just making work and trying not to think about what's next. I'm just furiously just trying to make as much work as I can and enjoy that investigative process. And also just re-examining my connections to material, because one thing I haven't said in this is I believe that we don't often look at what has been here forever. Like, I'm always reaching to tree barks, wood, things that have endured anyway, and that have kind of served as a witness to everything around us. And that's one of the reasons why I like to use organic materials as well as these other things that I've talked about. And I'm beginning to really study why I'm using some of these specific things over and over and over again. I thought I knew, but I think it's time for me to continue that reflection.
I love that. That sounds amazing. And for folks, if they want to see your work at these, you said Elliot, I didn't catch the
Elliot Hundley.
Hundley.
Yeah.
Okay. Where can we find this? Are you on social media posting this? Is it on your website?
Oh,
can
I
we
haven't
find out?
posted anything about that yet because it hasn't happened. Like, and I did the show. I'm on Instagram. You can always see what I'm up to on my IG page. So
Okay, awesome,
yeah,
awesome.
that's
Yeah,
just Reg
definitely want to.
Herod. Yeah,
Reg Herod.
Reg Herod. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. Yes. Sade put it into the chat. Thank you so much, Sade. You're always on it. So amazing. Regina, this has been really amazing. I'm glad that we finally had a chance to sit down and talk, and I hope we get to continue it in person soon.
Absolutely. I look forward to that.